Okay, good evening, everybody. Being 7 o'clock or just after, we will start our hearing. We're missing one member. We think he's back from vacation, but if not, and if he won't make it tonight, he will review the tape, file the paperwork so that he's still a voting member. But tonight we have with us Thomas Swain, Elizabeth Dwyer Leonard, and our newest member, Stephen Newball. So thank you very much for being here, Stephen. Planning department, we have Christine Zale and Kim Johnson here. Elizabeth is on vacation, so she will be back next week, but she's on vacation. One item on the agenda, one project on the agenda tonight, which is the Thoreau Residences LLC for a comprehensive permit under sections MGL Chapter 40B, paragraphs 20 through 23 for a 237 unit multifamily development, which is a 13.08 acre portion of the real property known and numbered as 275 Forest Ridge Road. We were supposed to be having a meeting 3 weeks ago, and we didn't have enough material yet to make that a fruitful meeting. So we decided to cancel that meeting and just have maybe a longer session here tonight. But we have a lot to cover tonight. We're getting towards the end of, I think, the material that is to cover. I think we're really honing in on some items, but we're getting there. We've scheduled another meeting. Well, we had originally said that our next meeting will be the March 13 as part of the regular ZBA meeting, and then with potentially a vote coming. That I actually think we want to be closing our hearing at that point in time. I mean, that is the goal. With missing the meeting 2 weeks ago, it might be a bit tight. I definitely don't want to close if we're not feeling comfortable that we can close, but that is definitely what we are working towards and then voting on a decision on April the 2nd, which is also a regular scheduled meeting for the board. So that's where we are. So that's the administrative issues, and I think I think it's balls now in your court. I think to give us an update where you are, where we are, where your conversations with the various peer review consultants are, and then I know there's some material that came in this afternoon that might need some discussions, and I know there might be one of the peer reviewers wants to review something during the meeting here tonight or discuss something. So yeah, with that all said, I think it's up to you to tell us where you are, what's changed, what's the updates.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. Jim Lambert, Wood Partners, here on behalf of the applicant. If I could have the ability to share my screen, I can pull up the presentation. It's relatively short in terms of what we're presenting, but there is a lot to discuss, certainly. I don't know if there's a way to make that screen.
Yeah, one of the tabs at the bottom, you should be able to make that.
Here we go. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. So what I'd like to do is just start with share the listing out what we've submitted since the last hearing, and like you said, we were originally scheduled to be here on February 13th. They appreciate the flexibility. So apologize that we weren't able to, submit everything by then, but. So here's what we've submitted and we'll discuss tonight. So we've got a number of items. Number one, we have a response to the architectural peer review that we have submitted in full in writing. Is requested by the board. We have had numerous, I guess now 2 responses to the traffic peer review have been submitted. And then we saw come in today back to us a response to the second response of the traffic peer review. I think that's largely closed out, but we can certainly discuss that. We have a revised site plan that we're going to walk through. We have going out of order. We have a narrative of the site plan changes that we'll walk through in conjunction with that site plan on the screen. And then we have a revised landscape plan that we'll go through in detail, including detailing some buffers zone that we had, included now at the end of the entry drive for Sweet Birch Lane. We have our full cast of characters here tonight: architectural, engineering, and legal, and some folks are actually on the Zoom as well. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Phil Cordero from Allen and Major. Phil, if you could walk through the site plan. This is a revision, slight revision from what you saw at the last hearing. More detail this time than any major changes, but if you'd like, Phil, we can walk through that and I can fill in as needed.
Sure, happy to do it. I'm Phil Cordero from Allen and Major, Associate Civil Site Engineer. We always start with this plan. This is the overall site layout. I think the next slide zooms in a little bit, right? So we can jump to that for a second. What we really wanted to denote, if you could just go back to the main site just for 1 second. Thank you. In terms of site engineering, what's transpired between the last meeting and this meeting is formal incorporation of a lot of the elements that we talked about, that we solicited feedback on, to confirm the applicant's intent to do those. Where we're going at the next step. So the one last piece that we need to do, once we've had now the confirmation that everybody is generally comfortable with where the project is headed, we will do the final tick and tie on the engineering technical matters. Stormwater coordination of calculations. So there is one more revision coming. I won't necessarily call it a revision so much as a full comprehensive plan set from us, Allen and Major Site Engineering, to GPI on conclusion of this hearing. So within the next day or so, it's going to be one more package. We'll ask GPI to review it, comment on it, and Mr. Chair, to your point, hopefully that sets the stage that for the next meeting, we're by and large done with the technical matters. So some of this may be slightly redundant, but I'm just going to point them out to make sure we've captured everything. In terms of the overall site layout plan, no changes to the number of units on the project sizes of the building. But as we're walking in from the site, and I'll do it geographically as we're coming in off of Forest Ridge Road, we had a very healthy discussion at the last meeting on the width of the site driveway. That remains the same. And the reason it remains the same is we attended a site walk myself personally with the members of the fire department, the fire chief, the deputy fire chief, and one of his assistants. They are comfortable with the site driveway as drawn at this moment. So we have not changed it. Yes, Mr.
So what are the widths?
So the ingress lane is 18 feet. It's a 6-foot median, and then it's a 14-foot egress lane with spacing between the medians that allows the fire apparatus vehicles to navigate around any stalled vehicles, cross into other lanes of traffic should they determine it's necessary. But it was the embracing of, full and complete access for the fire department because singular vehicular roadway. So we attended that. The driveway is still the same. They were comfortable with those metrics. I understand, Mr. Chair, I know you had some concern.
I still have those concerns.
So we will, we'll obviously defer that conversation, but we'll start our response based on the fire department's actions to what we've provided them. The other element is we're working in off of the street. Another healthy discussion was determination is if there's alternative access to the site that is not through that main site driveway. So as part of that site walk, what I did with the personnel is off of the end of the cul-de-sac of Forest Ridge Road, directly in front of the club. There is an existing cart path, and it's actually in the cutout here of the property line.
I have slides.
You have slides. Okay, go ahead.
I'll have to skip back, but I can go to the end.
Sure, thank you. I apologize for jumping around. So as we pick up off of the end of the cul-de-sac, there is an existing clearing that I walked with the fire department to determine if that would be adequate to them for use as a secondary fire access road. And the general response is they would be in keeping with the road, or they would be approving of that, the use of that roadway with certain conditions put into place on it, that the road is maintained, the road is snow plowed, and there's some areas of the roadway. Could you go to the next piece of the slide? There's some areas of the roadway as it comes up sort of easterly along the sideline of the sideline of the Thoreau Club property. It then turns northerly. There is some undulating terrain that they've asked would be smoothed out, so any of their apparatus vehicles would not bottom out on the terrain. But this secondary path would provide backdoor access to the project at the northeasterly tip of it, just north of Building B. The final details of this, the ability to work it out, that all still needs to be done. But we're moving in a direction that the fire department is willing to talk with us as being an adequate secondary path.
Good. And Phil, I'd like to, if I could jump in.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to note here. One, this is being requested by the fire department. I think you saw a letter that was submitted today in that regard. This is not something that we have, this is an open item still with the land seller, who's the owner of the Thoreau Club. This is, this path does go through private land. But also I would add that a portion of it, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, goes actually on town-owned land as well, I believe. So there would be easements required from the town for the project as well as through the Thoreau Club. So there's it may be not quite as straightforward as it may seem on the surface, although possible.
It's viable, but it has to be verified. Yeah.
So the easements would just be the Thoreau Club and the town, there's no other.
That is my understanding. Is that your
Homeowner?
understanding?
Correct. So the land where it's on the Thoreau Club property, an easement would be required for the applicant to use it as
Yep.
part, for maintenance
I've got
purposes and
that, just
access.
as long as it's not on any other private property besides.
It would
the
not
Thoreau
be,
Club.
that's correct.
I'm good.
And then obviously the maintenance on the town's land, because it's now part of the project per se, for the exclusive use of the fire department. It is not part of the traveled way for any of the potential residents of the project. This is fire department only.
Right.
And Phil, is it not part of the trail system today? Is that?
So part of the reason this came about, Jim's alluding to sort of the historical context of this, is we were looking at alternative routings, and those familiar with the Powder Mill Trail system, that's part of the trail system. So it certainly seemed quite adequate and wide enough to start a conversation.
Mhm.
And the fire department was certainly willing to review it with us, and we think we're on a good path with them. And that letter that went into the file seems to support that. Okay, would you go just back to the overall, sir? I'm sorry to jump around on you, we're just trying to get the details in. A couple technical matters, your peer review consultant wanted us to make sure that we had site distances on the site plans. We've done that now. They wanted it graphically shown on the primary plans. That has been incorporated. There is some landscaping, and our landscape architect is here. He will discuss those later. There is some landscaping directly across the site entrance that's formally been incorporated into the drawings. He will discuss that. Coming in along the main site driveway, there was some discussion about the number of street trees, the placement of the sidewalk, the placement of the lighting. That's all now been coordinated. Street trees throughout the entirety of the driveway. And the pedestrian sidewalk and the lighting is on the northerly side of the driveway, where it makes sense for the connection to the existing crosswalk at the entrance to Forest Ridge Road, and provides a through connection all the way through the project. So I won't point them out necessarily, But Davis Square had noted in their review, we wanted to make sure there are pedestrian sidewalks everywhere. They're now complete. The network is complete, on site. If you wanted to advance to the zoomed in portion, then please. As you enter into the site, forgive me, it's now turned 90 degrees, so the driveway is here where I am. We cleaned up the geometry. We had indicated to you the roundabout that was taking place at the clubhouse. That still remains. However, we've cleaned up the geometry to have better traffic control, which was something that GPI had pointed out to us. We have stop bar control. We have dedicated turning lanes. Again, all of that activity is intended to pull itself away from the residents here. So all those sight lines, all the headlight glare that's pulled away from the impact zones. The parking spaces, those were discussed, those are removed, 23 parking spaces, the retaining wall is put in its place. We have, as we're continuing into the site, we have focused our efforts on reallocating some of the amenity-based areas. Not to bury the lead, we'll let the landscape architect speak in greater detail about those. But we incorporated a larger tot lot / playground. That was a very important point of discussion at the last meeting. We've incorporated a multi-purpose, we're calling it a sports court, but it's an open area, multi-purpose. We'll put a basketball net, but it could be a general play area off of the traveled way. We also still have our dog park. It's been relocated to accommodate these additional areas. And then we still do remain with the open area on top of our leaching fields, which will read as lawn. But we've also incorporated split rail fencing as a demarcation line between vehicular movement traffic and the ability to use that area for any of the children or the residents on site. So we've really created the amenity zone sort of along this westerly sideline of the site. And in keeping with that, again, as part of the peer reviews comments, we've incorporated some traffic control, stop bars, stop signs, anywhere our parking lots intersect our main site driveways. That was a recommendation, very technical in nature, but we've certainly captured that. The speed table that we discussed between buildings A and B to maintain that through corridor, to slow traffic through here, have our dedicated bus shelter for school buses to come through, have a raised table that'll be stamped concrete, a different material to create that visual pedestrian connection that we talked about between buildings A and B and the various courtyards, direct centered amenities in that location. Technical again, there was some commentary from your consultants as to how trash is being handled on site. Reminder, there are no exterior trash enclosures. They're all being handled internal to the buildings. And when trash needs to be picked up, there are roll-up doors on the easterly side of each of the buildings with an area marked out, no parking here and here. Those have now been fully designated and coordinated on the plan. When it comes time for trash, it'll be brought outside, picked up, and then continue on. We've also noted on the plans, you'll see them probably more so on the landscaping plans in detail, but we did add some designation of the propane tanks, buried propane tanks that we discussed with the board that would fuel fire pits and grills in the amenity center here, and that's it. Those would be the only fuels used on site. We talked about it at a prior meeting. When we reach the northerly portion of the site, last thing we've done is we have reconfigured our parking zone. As we talked about, we're trying to minimize it. But in the northerly corner of the site or northeasterly corner of the site plans have a designation for 28 spaces to be marked as reserved. And the reason they're marked as reserve is we've skinnied the parking back to the minimum necessary to support the project in an effort to reduce the amount of pavement that we're introducing on the site. So we would ask the board to support 28 reserved spaces that would be built only on shown need for the project.
What's your ratio without these spaces?
Let me check on that, Mr. Chair, and I'll get it back to you. I don't have it written here. I apologize. Do you happen to know offhand?
No.
We will find out.
Okay,
I'll get the answer for you. But we do want to minimize the parking, and we've introduced the notion of reserve formally, and it's the extension of the parking area. The other element that we've done, it's still, again, very much in flux, but as we learn more about the project, as the designs advance, we do want to incorporate elements into it. If you look very closely, you will notice that the rectangular boxes that we've always had on our plan that are denoting our wastewater treatment fields, which again, still subject to design and permitting through the consultant and Mass DEP. But we have been able to skinny up the primary reserve area underneath the amenity and this parking tray. We've been able to reduce, or excuse me, eliminate one of the reserve areas. As we advance the design, we're able to really finalize these areas. So we're able to drop one of the reserve areas and lessen the remaining one with the idea, again, to shrink wrap that grading into the site and minimize the amount of tree removal that we need to do on the project. So these will be fully incorporated into the project as we continue down the road.
Have it at once.
One six.
Phil, Phil,
Yes.
who makes the decision about whether you have to use those reserve spaces? How is that done?
Well, that's a great question. I think that's something we need to discuss with the board, on what the mechanism is for that to be proved that those spaces are needed. I think there's a variety of ways you can do that, with counts, from our property management firm, but we're open for that discussion, certainly.
I mean, I would assume, and somebody needs to prove that it's either a building inspector or us. That's what I would think.
I would think there'd be some sort of
And then,
process where we would have to come to the board or the building department and say, we need these, and we would have to provide counts.
Yeah.
For some period of time, saying that the lot is full or approaching full, and I'm not sure.
Not tonight necessarily, but do you want to propose the mechanism, or do we want to suggest, for example, it may not be you that would say we need more parking for lots of reasons, you may not want to do that. But I could see some of the folks who live there say, gosh, we do need some more parking. And what would their mechanism be? Well, it might be to go to you, or it might be go to the building inspector.
no,
or whatever.
I think they will come to us, because the moment residents start complaining,
Correct.
they will be on
Yeah,
it, because
okay.
they wanna lease their units.
Yeah.
Right, so
Yeah.
it will be them, and they will have to come up to us with us or the building department with a formal request and
Good.
some backup for that request.
Yeah. So
And,
we can coordinate that. So we're introducing the notion, or I guess furthering it from our last discussion. We can present some conditional language for the board's review.
So, and to that as well, I've been involved with quite a few projects, and this was something we've done quite often. As far as I know, they've never been built.
Right,
So, and I think, and then here as well, although, our opinions, the applicant and my opinion vary, but I think 1.6 is still up there. So, that's, why I'm pretty comfortable with.
Assuming that's correct, Bill, I took the 409, took out the 29. That's how,
Yeah,
does that
that's the
sound right
number.
to you?
It sounds right, because the base number, while it's 1.6 per, based on unit count, we've endeavored to provide one space for the bedrooms, per bedroom.
Yeah,
We're
so yeah, which is,
below-
and that's,
we're below
that's,
that number.
Yeah,
that's,
and, right.
right, and 1.6 is, per unit is what I'm used to, numbers like that.
Right.
And.
But just to understand the derivation of those numbers based on 401
yeah.
bedrooms. That is the bucket.
Good.
So that's the introduction in terms of the formal, issuance of site plan changes. Again, my next step to this board will be one complete plan set. At this point, the last issuance that you got were some layout plans and some grading plans. The next set will be the full comprehensive set with all of the truck turning details, stormwater calculations, et cetera, including an itemized response letter to GPI's peer review with all of their comments, so the board can track everything that we've changed.
And when is that set coming, you think?
So we have it done. We didn't want to drop it on the board before a meeting, so our intent was to appear here tonight, hear any additional comments, and you will see it as soon as tomorrow or Monday morning.
Okay, and then there'll be hard copies?
Yes,
Planning
Yes,
department?
we will submit the hard copies. We will issue the electronic copies to you and certainly to your consultants.
Thank you.
To do a final review. So
Thank
we're ready to go.
Phil, for my
Yes.
clarification, you, somewhere it's been indicated that you've added 40 feet to preserve trees, et cetera, 10,000 square feet of preserved buffer, et cetera. Where would that be?
Here, sir.
Okay,
So this was in that of the elimination of the 23 parking
Yep.
spaces and moving that grading into the site. And instead of creating transitional slope grading, we will construct the wall. So this is that zone where we've kept those trees.
okay,
And then the additional area will actually occur back here, I guess, you know, the northeasterly portion of the site, by not building the reserve, by not building the parking, by not building the reserve septic area, and by not building the reserve parking area, that grading shrinks into the site and there's additional tree save in there also.
great, thank you.
Is any other questions out here? Otherwise.
Sorry for all these interruptions, but
No,
go ahead, go
I
ahead.
prefer the back and forth. I'm all set. If there's questions from the board, otherwise I'll turn it over to my other colleagues.
Yep, we're gonna have Tom Minor.
Can I please? Hi, everybody. I'm Ian Urquhart from Nutter, McLennan and Fish. I'm legal counsel for the applicant. And, you know, to activate those reserve spaces, we could draft a condition in the decision with standards to get the spaces, so. Something along those lines, so we can work with you on that when the time comes.
So let me hear, this is a bit unusual, but since you're here and since you wanna talk, there is a comment from a neighbor, and although I you know, while they're still presenting, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gary Clayton, 31 Black Horse Lane, immediate butter to the property. Thank you, because my question here, both in terms of process, was as the presentation proceeds this evening, there seems to be a logical break in the presentation, and might it be an opportunity for questions or comments? You've just made the decision in this moment to allow it. Thank you. So just two quick points relative to the emergency road address. Could I ask if you could go back on the slide?
Oh, sure.
to Just, I hope this will be to help clarify, at least as I understand it, because that gravel way, unimproved way, but it's clearly passable for a vehicle, extends to Border Road and Thoreau Hills. My assumption, and I underscore the word assumption, is that when the Thoreau Club was planned and ultimately approved by the town, I assume that was the emergency access point for the property that is now the Thoreau Club, because there is no other way into the Thoreau Club site. So just sort of make that point, because that gravel path extends all the way down to Border Road. But I understand that the fire department is looking for is how to stay on the either Thoreau Club property or bring it over to the proponent's property. And you mentioned that a portion of it cuts across town property. I believe that portion of the town property is conservation land.
Yes,
So I would urge you to consult with the
yeah.
Division of Natural Resources, because that land is subject to certain restrictions on its use. And I'm not gonna opine on what this may be or whether applicable in this instance, but I think it's probably better to flag that sooner rather than later for your attention.
Yeah, thank you.
And then one of the just point relative to the proposed, we'll call it basketball court area, but is that gonna be illuminated? Is it intended to have nighttime illumination, or have you gotten that far in your?
We haven't gotten that far. I think that we're open to that. Is it a concern or?
I guess at this point, this is the first time I'm hearing it, I would characterize that as a concern. And I also wonder whether that playing area might be just shifted. I'm not sure of the direction here, whether it's northward,
Let me
but,
go to the site.
away from the top playing area and move both the dog park and the playing court, lack of a better term, just kind of keep shifting it in that direction. My reasoning is, yes, basketball courts are pickleball, and I know we've heard the controversy that sometimes surrounds the use of those kinds of playing facilities and the noise associated with them. It seems to me if you shifted it that way, you at least move it somewhat greater distance away from the nearby residences at Black Horse Lane.
May I address that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Point very well taken, and I would want to just give you some backup as to why it's here. And the reason it's in this location, as I was mentioning to the board, we do have the underlying septic system for the treatment plant. So we've kept the sports court and the tot lot off of those fields because of the embedment depths necessary for either the asphalt surface, or if we embed a post for the basketball court, or any of the elements for the playground. The dog park is a fence. So the dog park, we can work around the field. The other elements would intrude upon the wastewater leaching fields, which is why the order is as you see it, and the position is as you see it. It's driven by the balance between, obviously, respect to the abutters, but the underlying infrastructure that needs to go into. what-
And I wasn't suggesting that you move the top part, I'm fine, I'd love to hear the kids. I mean, we let the camps there now, we hear the kids laughing and playing during the daytime, it's fine, I don't have an issue with that. It's more how that undefined hard surface playing court. My request would be to, I understand the point, but to reconsider and perhaps shift that if you can. Thank you.
I just think I would add that, I think it is quite a bit of a distance though already from Sweet Birch Lane and from.
The Sweet Birch, I think it is far enough away from Sweet Birch, it's Black Birch.
Blackbird, but
It's, and I'm just thinking, you know, some of us play basketball.
Yeah.
Or pickleball, and the sounds can reverberate, so if you've got the chance at this point in your planning efforts, it would be appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Tom. Thank
yeah.
Good evening, board. Tom Minor, Park Design, landscape architect. We did the landscape design for this particular project. I will just briefly go over the changes revisions we've made to the landscape plan based on the site plan revisions and the peer review comments. This
Let me know where you want to go.
slide 4, Jim. This is slide.
I'm not sure what order you have your sheets on there, but.
That's the two buildings, northern part of the site. I'll be repeating some of Phil's comments, but to begin with, as in response to the peer review, to get to a more central amenity facilities, we've taken the dog park and the tot lot from this area, moved it down here, added the sport court as Phil mentioned. The tot lot is a larger expanded area for two different age groups. And the sport court will provide amenity space for older youths and adults. After looking at the increased tree save areas, we've gone into we've added some evergreen trees. Oops, gonna have to go down to the next slide, Jim. I'm sorry.
No problem. This one?
Yeah. We've added evergreen trees along this area here. We've added some here. We've added more along this buffer area for thorn. We've added some additional trees here. Along the site, we've at the request of everyone, we've added more street trees along the left side of the road coming up. There's 13 additional shade trees, 3-inch caliber shade trees along the left-hand side. I'm gonna blow up of this area here off the entry. We've added approximately 80 feet of 6-foot-high solid board fence. Oh, you got to blow up on that. There you go. This is a pretty substantial existing evergreen screen here, but we've added 4 more evergreens along with the fence that is directly opposite the egress drive. And then go to, well, yeah, well, you'll eat a courtyard. There you go. This is our major courtyard, and I'll just quickly review the major components as the pool, the plunge pool, two patios, one with a fire pit and grills, the other patio with grills and either a shade structure or catenary lights with different types of seating. We've removed the synthetic turf that we had inside the pool and replaced it with stamped concrete. And we've replaced this synthetic turf area here with stamped concrete for active adult use. Our next step will be to define these shrub beds all around. Right now, we're just showing them as masses, but we'll infill those. We're in the process of doing that with shrubs, ornamental grasses, perennials to give separations from the lawn areas and the outdoor spaces and the ground floor units. There are a lot of trees in here that we haven't shown just to make these areas more visible. Propane tank area is right in this vicinity right there. You wanna go to the other courtyard, Jim? This amenity area hasn't changed at all. It's more of a passive use. You have the propane tank area right here. This is our large table crosswalk with a bus stop. This will be landscaped. Again, we'll have some shrub masses around the building and in the around each seating area, fire pit, grills, seating area. And those will provide separation from the use areas and the patio. Some of these will probably move. I can see this one moving right here, actually. And this will probably switch around here as we get into the final design. If you want to go back to this, the top line, I forgot to. This is the blow up of the top lot, the sport court and the dog park. It is a ADA accessible path to connect all three, and we will, we're not showing anything in these areas now. There'll probably be something there, but there won't be anything large to obstruct any view lines. This will be a much safer access path to the amenities than we had before up at the top of the site. That's, anything else, Jim, that I missed? I think so. Any questions?
Sure, I had this question before, if you're going, I can see the path from the top lot from the first building, but not from the second. Would a child coming across, where would they cross, to get to that gray crosswalk that you're showing?
Good question.
May I?
Yep.
It's not shown on this plan, that raised speed table. So the intent.
They go across the raised speed table.
Right, because the idea was to bring people through
Yep.
this center connectivity. So if you are coming from building B, you would come across the speed table and that, you know.
And
the
then you
raised
go
table.
along the building.
And then you would go along the sidewalk in front of building B to cross and then go to
Oh,
the amenities.
Got
zone.
it, okay,
I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
okay,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, the idea, because we heard that feedback early on
Mhm.
about making sure these buildings were connected through, that residents in building B felt like they were connected, not only through the passive courtyard, but the ability to connect
Yeah.
through to get to the active courtyard. So it made sense for just all of those pedestrians, including the children,
Good,
to follow that same path and then branch to go to the amenities.
that makes sense. And then along those same lines, will the tot lot be fenced or not?
We usually fence them.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, great.
Will the Alderman set of plans show the landscaping that he's described? Well, just identify a number of areas there'll be increased landscaping.
Yeah, we'll do blow-ups, we're doing blow-ups of all these buildings with our all these plants called out and a legend
Okay.
sizes.
Great.
Yeah.
types.
Okay.
I will come back to the landscape part later, and I'll put my peer review hat on at that point in time. But now just continue with the presentation here so that we.
Yeah,
Like
this
you
is-
get any.
Well,
through this
that
PowerPoint.
really concludes the presentation in terms of what we have on the slides. Now, the two other major items were the response, a written response to the architectural peer review, which is really reflected in what we just went through on the changes.
Mhm.
Happy to answer any questions that Cliff may have. I think he's on.
Cliff's on, I know Cliff
And
wants to
then the
talk,
second
yeah.
one is the back and forth responses to the traffic peer review, which I think is largely closed out, but I won't presume that you feel that way, but I'm happy to respond on that as well.
Yeah, and I think it's largely closed out, but it's just those last little
There-
pieces, right?
there
That's always
So we
with
can
the
go
hot
through that
part,
if
so.
you'd like. We don't have a slide for it, but we could go through the response letter.
No, I mean, unless the board feels differently, but, I've read it and there's just a few little things that need to be dealt with, and I think there is something else, a larger item that would want to be dealt with, so, and I think I do wanna, from what still needs to be done tonight, when we're talking about that is, indeed, I wanna see where we stand on a waiver list. As I said, Cliff wants to talk, I would like to talk, I'm sure there is some neighbors here, there's somebody already having their hand up. So there's gonna be some other stuff, but just in general now here first, the board, any general questions about presentation?
I don't-
No?
Nope.
Okay, well, I was just gonna go to the public, whether there's any general questions, on the presentation tonight. Cindy, you had your hand up earlier, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm curious about, is it five
Name
levels?
and address, please.
Is it 5 levels that the
Name
building?
and address, please.
What? Oh, I'm
Name
sorry.
and address.
I'm sorry. Cindy Howland, 2 Sweet Birch Lane. Is that-
Thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Sure, sorry.
Mm.
I didn't think I would get picked so fast, but one of my
You
concerns.
had your hand up for a while, so.
I did. One of my concerns is that I don't think there's any other building, but I could be wrong, in Concord that's 5 stories. And why 5 stories? And am I wrong? Am I right that it's going to be 5 stories?
You're right that it's gonna be 5 stories. There's gonna be at least 2 buildings in Concord very shortly that are gonna be as tall. But yeah, that's what it is to get to the amount of units, and actually we pushed very early on, like a year ago, I think, over a year ago. This board kind of pushed the applicant to go a little bit higher so that the
Oh.
footprints of the buildings could be made smaller and with less ground disturbance. So that's where we ended up with with where we are right now.
So can I ask that question, the architect, can that be, will that be seen from Forest Ridge? Because I know that, are you still going to go down? Because that landscaping goes down. Are you gonna fill?
Yeah,
it up so it will be level?
The site's in a hole, and I think a meeting, 2 or 3 meetings ago, we had a presentation about this. I don't know whether you have the ability now to pick up those slides or have those visuals, but
can search
if
for
you're
them.
not, then
I don't have them offhand, but I could,
yeah.
if I stop sharing, I could.
Hmm?
The sections on the site. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing we could,
Bring up the submitted sections, that shows you the cut from from the road all the way down.
yeah, so while we look for that,
Yep, it's in the documents.
Yeah, I have it somewhere, but I'd have to submit a few minutes.
yeah, it's also in our submitted documents, so.
That's true.
So that's a done deal, 5-story, it's non-negotiable.
Correct, that ship has pretty much sailed, and it sailed about a year ago,
Okay,
so. But, and that's, yeah, we'll pull up some sections here, while we'll look for that.
and then just one of my concerns as an abutter
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
right,
Yeah, can you,
there are no
sorry, go
school
ahead.
buses going up this road.
Say that again?
There are no school buses that enter this neighborhood. And now we're gonna have a lot of school buses coming up.
You will now get the school bus picking up kids here, yeah, correct.
School buses.
Forest Ridge is still a private road. So is that going to be a public road?
No, yeah, I doubt that.
Okay,
So there, here is, so you can, if you look at the screen right now, we pulled up a section, one of the sections that were done for the presentations a while ago. So you can see how the building is really sitting in a hole, and even the roof is below, the top line of the roof is below the roofs of Black Birch.
okay,
That's where we are, so that the visibility should, you know, depending on where you are, but that, yeah, you, at least scroll down, you scroll down. You can see here some photo simulations that the applicant did, sort of, you know, looking in between homes, sort of towards the rear where the building would be.
okay. Thank you. Nothing I can do,
Excellent,
but thank
thank
you.
you. Mr. Fluet, John Fluet, hopefully I pronounced that.
You
correctly.
did great. Thank you. Yeah. John Fluet, from 3 Sweet Birch, Cindy's neighbor.
Yeah.
I have two questions. One is on the trail. I know it was mentioned it was adequate to the fire department, but is that adequate with some work? Like, is there going to be any clearing that will have to happen in that trail system? Do we know?
I can answer that. So we walked it in the winter time. Speaking for the fire department, deferring obviously, of course, to their official opinion. There's some minor understory brush that may need to be cleared to make sure it's of sufficient width. So just basic scrub brush. We identified the possibility that there may be 2 trees right where a fire apparatus would need to take a left to go towards the development that may need to be removed. And the way we left it at the sidewalk is when the conditions were better and they were drier, the fire department would bring a piece of equipment out and we would actually drive down and confirm what would need to go. So the long and the short of it is possibly some light vegetation removal and maybe a tree or 2, but it's subject to some further testing from the fire department.
And if I may read the fire department's letter here, that it says that fire department walked up with you, Phil, and the construction team. We walked both secondary egress path that abuts the property and is existing, with some minor landscaping and limbing. This path would be sufficient for what we want to achieve in the event of an emergency. The fire department overall is satisfied with the proposed secondary path. We will work with the developer on how to secure access at a later date. So.
Okay, thank you. My second question is about the border plantings. So, so the fence at the end of the driveway to prevent any light spillage and the 4 trees that are behind there. I was surprised that that's all the border planting that's being put in, or any barrier, considering the amount of extra traffic coming up the road. So I'm on 3 Sweet Birch, which is right on the corner of the Rotary, a little roundabout. So
Mhm.
it's a significant amount more trips coming past my house on there. So I had expected when we had talked about getting some, talked about doing some border and some noise abatement, that it would have extended beyond 4 trees. So I just wonder if
Okay.
there's any thoughts there.
Yeah, it's something I want to come back to later as well. There's 4 trees and a fence, so we'll touch on that, I think, a little bit later. So hang on
Okay,
to that
good.
discussion.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kenna.
Hi, yeah, Rob Canay, 29 Black Birch. We are, our unit is co-resident with Gary. And so we're the closest unit into the site. Quick question, total number of bedrooms is, I count 461, does that sound correct? Because I heard a different number being bandied around. This is based on the letter.
With 01.
401.
All right, so the letter that was published talked about 97 units that are either single or studios or 1 bedroom, 116 that are 2, and 24 that are 3, which I did my math twice. It comes up to 461, so I could have done my math wrong.
Yeah, that can be true, because, well, 10%.
Well, it was 97, 116, and 24. Is that correct?
The applicant is looking for it right now, Mr. Kenna, so, hang on.
I don't know if I can do that. It's not total, so I can do it with you as well.
So while they look for it, your question.
Yeah. So I was pleased to see that a number of parking places were removed on the, I guess, the west side, which was towards our units. But I would like to have some clarity on what trees will be removed. I know that there was going to be quite a few trees, and especially since they were lower, where the pine trees, the tops of the pine trees actually provide the screening. So any tree removed down there would open up the view and the noise and everything else to our units. And I know that, but I haven't seen anything concrete. The prior plan talked about removing roughly half the tree boundary between us and the site.
So those plans will be coming tomorrow that show a new limited work line, where the parking spaces are removed, on that little stretch.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, the plans as currently drawn do show the limit of work today. So what
Okay.
you already have, that is reflective of the modified grading in the retaining wall. So the tree line is drawn correctly today.
Mhm.
So the next set of plans will show that same line.
Okay.
Which document would show that? Is that the updated site plan?
It would be the updated site plan. It was, specifically, I would look at the grading drawings because that shows the
Yeah.
topography.
Yeah, they're all uploaded on the website.
Okay, and then could you go back to the site where it had someone standing out on our roadway looking toward the site, standing on Black Birch Lane, looking at the site?
Oh, that's a section, Christine, if you can pull it up
And
again.
while she's doing that, Mr. Chair, we confirm it is 401.
401 on the
Okay.
bedrooms. Okay.
Could you just confirm to me the number of 1 bedroom, the number of 2 bedroom, and the number of 3? Because obviously I have a transcription.
97 studio or 1 bedroom units.
Yep.
116 2-bed and 24 3-bed.
All right, so I guess I'm got to go back to grade school math.
Well, there's a school bus coming. So.
Yeah, I still get 461, but I'll double check that. So yeah, on that, the one with the photograph. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That one right there. So the actual, if I stand in my room, my bedroom is a good example. It's on that west side. It's on the east side of my unit to the back of where we're looking. That is, and you can see it based on the line, it would roughly be where my feet would be, where that dotted line is on the bottom. You have an upper and lower lines. Yeah, that guy. So my prominence is quite a bit higher than what might be indicated by the where the photographer took the picture. I'd be at a higher point. So that's a little bit misleading of a picture, if you understand. And I was also, so two things on that score. I think it'd be great if you guys could come out and just stand, you'd come to my house for that matter, and look out at what the view would be. The trees showing here, and I'm not sure which units these are. Is this my unit? Yeah, this is actually my unit on the right.
Alright.
The trees out my window are very thin, and primarily what you see is the trunks at the bottom of the trees. So anything that's removed below that, basically, whether the vegetation is out or not, I'll be looking through a line of tree trunks, no tree vegetation. And so the amount of removal of plants is significant. The Donnellys on the left, they actually have a set of trees that are right on the back side of their property, so they actually have a pretty good screen. I have none of that. And so I'm much more exposed to that sight line. And I was wondering if there, like I said, I'd love to see what the final reduction in buffer zone is, and also the height of the trees is valid, and any other additional mitigation to provide a visual screen would be goodness. The other thing is in addition, we talked about putting garage spots underneath the units. And I understand that's off the table at this point. But I was wondering why the whole building of structure A is raised up so much from the ground level versus lowering the site of building B, thus lowering the whole set of buildings, and what went into that thinking.
Well, I can give you a short answer on that. I think it all has to, the short answer is that there has to be an accessible path from the public way. It's not public, but it's a Forest Ridge Road to the building. So that's from there on, from Forest Ridge Road, you go down at a 5% grade maximum, and that will end you at the finished floor of the building. Now, there is some trickery that potentially could be done, but I think that's all sort of that grade, and so you can correct me if I'm wrong. The sites, I think the applicant wants the site to be as balanced in earthwork as possible. And so the two of them work hand in hand, and I think that will set a finished floor grade. So could you push it down a foot? Maybe, but I think in the scheme of things that would not, you're looking for 10 feet lower, and that
Yeah,
just
I'm
is
looking
not.
for a whole story, because with the 5-story structure, those top two floors are gonna, the fourth floor is gonna be, I don't know, roughly at my first floor, and the fifth floor is gonna be above my head. Which
Yeah.
is be pretty prominent on the horizon, particularly with the reduction of the buffer space.
Yeah, not correct. So that's, it is what it is. I don't want to minimize that, but there's gonna be some visual impact to the neighborhood. So,
Significant visual impact. And this picture doesn't quite state what it would be.
yeah. So, anyway, questions here in the room?
Yeah, Gary Clayton, 31 Blackbirch Lane. So following a couple of points. One,
He bumped you.
oh, sorry.
Well, he's gonna be much more gentle than I
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He's
Okay.
setting the stage.
So, so I appreciate the reduction in parking on the common property line with Blackbirch Lane. Retaining wall, I think is a helpful feature as well. To the, question though, that the previous speaker, Ken, was speaking to, it is I mean, that's a concern for us, and it's just 2 or 3 units, but it's important. We live there. And, you know, I've made the request before for the board to actually come and stand where we live and look, because the drawings you're looking at now are 2-dimensional, and they really don't give you a clear enough sense of what the difference will be. And the fact is that you know, for 7 months of the year, when there's no leaves on those trees, it's pretty much an open view to the current proposed area of construction. So I appreciate the fact that I think the landscape plan shows some limited number of plantings above the retaining wall. It's a useful first step, but it will mean nothing for us as neighbors, because it will mean something in 40 years when they've grown, perhaps, but they won't address the needs that we have and will have for the ongoing number of years where they are. So, you know, I guess I think it's really important for the board to actually stand on this area where we're talking about and look and see, because plans are, you're not gonna get that sense and that view from the plans. Secondly, appreciate the fact that, you know, the developer has been sensitive to the request of the Sweet Birch to try to mitigate some of the issues of headlights coming up the driveway and the like, and I'm not sure the number of trees proposing is adequate. I also think the placement of that fence seems awkward at best.
We'll get to that.
It sounds like you're gonna get to that, so I won't belabor it. But I guess I'm gonna ask the developer to think about, since your property line comes up actually almost to the top of the slope behind the 3 or 4 units at Black Birch, why not work with us to think about a little bit more in the way of a vegetative screen, an evergreen vegetative screen there? It would, a lot of the questions and concerns you're hearing right now, and there will be others, and there'll be others who would speak to this, would be pretty well resolved. Because the visual impacts are real, and they're, you know, it's a tall building for Concord, and I don't think we're gonna be having to deal with impacts on Forest Ridge Road, et cetera. And I'm not sure we need to have these additional impacts in terms of noise and visual impacts, which I think can be readily mitigated with some planning. And we'd be, as a trustee of the condominium association, we'd be willing to work with a development team we're not talking about a huge expanse of evergreen trees, but some in strategic locations along that common property line would go a long way to address this concern. Thank you.
And, you know, I think, you know, it's a few things here. So it is, you know, I feel a bit uncomfortable as a chairman, as a board, to make a developer do something on somebody else's private property, right? If this were public property, Concord's property, I feel very good conditioning stuff. But I'm just, this is my concern. It's just my hesitant that, you know, you should give some money to your neighbor. We can't tell them that, right?
No,
And so
that's
that's my concern. The second thing is as well, shortly after we had that second sidewalk, like even the week or so after, I did walk that whole trail system behind these units, and also, you know, I don't want to speak from the board, for the board, but I walked.
And done the whole thing, yeah.
And so,
for
and
sure.
I watched, because that trail is relatively close to your backyards.
It is.
And
It is.
so,
And if I may very quickly respond, so thank you for walking the trail. That trail is still 5 feet below our living quarters, our living level. So our perspective is still different from when you're walking the trail. Second, the proponent's property line comes up to about where that trail is. So I take your point about whether the developer should be required as a regulatory matter to do that. So I'm asking, since the development team is here, to at least think about this, because the area that we're talking about is a common boundary. It is also land that is restricted to the benefit of the town of Concord. There's a restriction on that. The restriction is held by the town of Concord. So to your point, Mr. Chair, about, you know, something being done on town land, well, it is town land, and the fact that the town has an interest in that property because of the restriction on it. So
It's private property.
but the town has rights. And just as I
The
mentioned.
town might have rights, but,
Well, they have property right. They have property right. Just as I mentioned earlier with respect to the emergency access way, the town has rights relative to that property too. So
right, because that's, the town owns that property.
they own it, but they also have hundreds of acres in town on which they hold restrictions. And that means they have some property rights in that private property. That's a matter of, that's a well-established law. That's not.
Yeah, but that still doesn't mean, well, and you
So-
jump in anytime you want, but, the town doesn't own it, and it might have rights there, but the town, the ownership or the rights that the town has on that piece of property are not impacted by this development.
Oh, I disagree. Totally
So-
disagree.
so-
I think if you ask folks in town, they would very clearly say it's being impacted.
Okay.
But I guess my point is actually to the development team. Just hear what we're saying, and we work together on this, and I appreciate that the zoning board of appeals might not want to be in the position to demand or require it as a matter of a condition of their approval.
Right.
But I hope you might be open enough to at least continue a conversation, because we're not talking about having to build a bridge or a wall or anything like that. This is I think, a very resolvable matter. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you, and let's now get some legalese.
Sure,
here.
just on that point, I mean, we maybe have looked at the conservation restriction sometime much earlier in the process, but we'll take another look at it with the developer and have a discussion, relative to this point.
Yeah, I think that's some good homework, for you for the next meeting. Thank you.
Hi, Jim Connolly. I'm at 27 Black Road. You were showing a picture of my home earlier. If you could put that back up, I appreciate that. I'm gonna beat this to death and even weigh in on the legal aspects of it. But before I do that, I would be remiss if I didn't say to the developer, I think you've made great progress from where we were with the pork chop driveway off the rotary 14 months ago or something like that. And those changes are appreciated. So I'm sure collectively, since this project's gonna happen and our goal is to make it the best project it can be, and we are gonna be neighbors,
We're trying.
that we ought to be able to find a way to get this done. So Gary's perspective, or, the comments on here need to be clarified. Phil, from your documents, my understanding is that the building is gonna be built at 180 feet. And the entry to the entrance to the rotary is gonna be at 180 feet.
Okay.
And the letter that was summarized says that the ridge line is 205 feet. So that's 25 feet. I'm 6 feet tall. Our houses are 5 feet in the air. That's 35 feet, which is my line of sight, my view shed. I understood when I looked at this, that was gonna be the building a floor is 10 feet tall. 30 feet is gonna come to the ridge line. So my view, and my neighbor's view is gonna be the top of the 3rd floor, the 4th floor, the 5th floor, and yet to be mentioned, the HVAC equipment, which is gonna be right out the back window. Now, some discussion, if I may.
Go ahead.
There's a slide in here that shows the island. There's a slide that shows another residence. And then the island in the development, if you could go down.
No, I think this is that was in their presentation. These are slides that are on the website.
I looked at them this morning.
Yeah.
Could you scroll down?
Is it?
This is another neighbor. And this is the view that those neighbors have. It's like taking a handful of wooden matches and standing on end and looking at the strike part. The vegetation, and it's referenced in the peer review that Davis Square did. This is all referenced in there. The facts are there. In fact, if I may, comment 5C1, because the proposed development is located at a significantly lower elevation from its nearest residential neighbors to the north, Black Birch, And because there's considerable distance between the neighbors and the development, there are opportunities for providing effective landscape screening. Parentheses, where existing tree growth left in place is insufficient. It is this topographical feature of the terrain combined with the buffering that helps justify taller and more concentrated development of the site. So to me, that's a powerful statement. I think also powerful is that where the existing tree growth is insufficient, combined with the buffering. So further in that document, I'll come back to the screen. If it's TAT, I don't know if TAT is here. Further in that document, peer reviewer, Davis Square. Is this reviewer's opinion that a survey should be done buffering that would be left in place to access effective screening of the development's view from the neighbors on Black Birch? Don't believe that was done. It may be necessary to supplement existing material with evergreens to achieve this year round. This includes screening views of rooftop mechanical equipment, which could be accomplished properly placed and scaled landscaping, but also rooftop screens. That's 5C2. Response to 5C2, the development team would respectfully disagree with the reviewer on the needs for site-specific tree survey. Tree survey is not part of the buffering request. It's not part of the HVAC request for screening. So I don't believe these issues have been addressed. Further, could you go down, just finish, find the island? In your plan, you have, that's a great view. Looking out of this is the view. This is the view. There's no vegetation there. So we're looking at 2.5 floors of your, Jim, come up and take a look. We're looking at 2.5 floors of your building. Now you've included 10 trees at the 180-foot level, if that's the right number. I want to get mired in the math again. But you've included 10 trees somewhere on the site plan at the 180-foot level. I can't see the 10 trees. They're 8 to 10-foot trees. You could put those 8 to 10-foot trees at the 205-foot level, and I'm going to be looking at the top of them. And what we're talking about collectively, that probably with less than a dozen trees planted in the conservation area or in conjunction with the Black Birch area or on the collected developers' property, that's what we're talking about. It's not a big deal. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Since you,
I have another comment on different issues. Wrapping up, I'd like to get that on the table.
yeah, well, get it out. Why not?
So Gary's a representative of Black Birch. Black Birch Association has written many letters to the board. One of the items that's been in there, not only the screening of the HVAC and the screening from our view, but has also been this idea of vibration and how are we going to track the vibration? So as background to the zoning board, on 2 occasions, my personal experience in sitting at my kitchen counter, boom, the whole house shakes. What is that from? Not the earthquake that happened a month ago. It is in fact from the StarMet site, where they're cutting and filling and taking out concrete footings. So, you know, we followed up on that. Gary was part of that. The EPA has put in a system to monitor the vibration in the surrounding area. I don't know if that's part of the building code here in Concord. I don't know whether it's standard. I do know that the EPA has the data of every day and what the vibration is. I do know that there are acceptable levels of vibration for foundation and plaster and light. I do know that if I'm at the Thoreau Club, I don't want to have a crack in my swimming pool in July or on Border Road or at Sweetbridge. So we've requested this twice. I'm sorry. The board has requested that this be considered in 2 separate memos. I'm not aware of a response. I put that on the table.
Have you guys done any geotech as in terms of expecting any rock? Are you expecting any blasting?
I'd have to look back, it's been a long time since we did a report.
Yeah.
Minimal.
Yeah, it's not a commonplace, I think that's their vibration monitoring. But,
Well, I'm sorry, I'm 250, 300 feet away.
Yeah.
We're gonna be, I don't know what we're gonna be, 100 feet away? 120 feet away? Whatever's happening, I mean, we're gonna feel it. Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, I'm just not sure how to respond to that comment, you know, with all due respect, like, you know, you're gonna feel it and it's like. Yeah, you're gonna feel it. The question actually is. What can we do to make sure that you don't have any negative impacts, right? Because you're gonna, you know, if pavement when it's being compacted, you know, all earthwork when it's being compacted, you're gonna feel, you know. There's construction going on, so there is stuff happening. But, you know, I'm just struggling with like, okay, you don't wanna have any lasting negative impacts from that, right? That's, I think, is what you're after, and I'm struggling with that, you know, because I want to make sure that you don't have those lasting impacts, obviously. I'm just not sure on how to accomplish that.
Well, with all due respect, I think that's why this issue was put forward a year ago. First time, it was put forward again in December, with the most recent communication. And quite frankly, if I'm the builder or the developer, I want to know what's going on to protect myself. So I don't know that the monitoring system is the end all and be all, but there needs to be some acknowledgement that these properties are in close proximity to their planned construction. And some process put in place for potential remediation, I would think.
You had a comment, yes, I'll come.
Your last comment, pardon me, I have some familiarity with the vibration and, damage that can be caused. So I have no doubt that the owner and the developer, if he thinks there's a problem, would want to talk to his contractor and require some kind of testing. I think your remedy for the moment is probably not with the zoning board. I'm not sure we would have the authority to impose that as a condition. I would recommend that you go see the building inspector here in Concord and see what he says, what your remedies might be, what paths should be followed, if any. He would have a better handle on the building code than we would. So I would recommend you talk with the building inspector and see what he might say to assist you with dealing with your concerns.
Yeah, and well, and also, I know that if there's blasting that happens at a project, you'll do a pre-blast survey. You know, we could potentially request a pre-blast, but pre-construction survey to be done, you know, comparable to a pre-blast survey. Because, you know, obviously if there's blasting going on, there is, you know, stuff can really happen if blasting at a shorter distance, and cracks can, so you want to have a pre and a post. And, you know, as long as we have a pre-baseline, then if there's anything that you feel that you need to have addressed after construction, then, you know, we have something to fall back on, like this was already, you know. And I think something to that effect, I think might be a good condition here.
I would concur. I do think the establishing the baseline conditions would make a lot of sense, because otherwise you get involved in endless debate about did the construction cause some, you know, cracking of a foundation or a wall or the like, and in some whatever photographic baseline might be I'm not an expert in this, but
Yeah, but
something like that.
I know it's a standard requirement if there's blasting, so I'm sure there is standards on how you do that.
And I wasn't so sure much it was gonna be blasting, because we sit on a lot of glacial derived gravel and sand, but there's gonna be a lot of earth moving, and presumably, I think, a fair amount of compaction, and that does happen on the StarMed site as well. That compaction activity is pretty significant. And I think that's what Jim is
Yeah.
speaking to. So
Yeah.
that might be a.
Yeah, but I do think, I mean, I think there's some protocols in place and there is no blasting, but there is protocols in place on how you do that, how you establish a baseline.
Yes.
And I think
agree.
that would be a good thing.
My colleague Jim Ward is on the.
Oh,
He's got his hand up.
okay, that's,
That's
Jim,
me.
go ahead.
Sorry about that. I put my picture up, but I don't know if I'm ready for prime time. I'm recovering from surgery on Monday, so I'm not the best I've ever looked.
Oh, we won't comment on that one.
Yeah, I suppose I walked into that one. As far as surveys and things like that, clearly if we find out that we have to blast, and there's a state law that and regulations that govern pre-blast surveys. Beyond that, I'm not familiar with any state law or regulation that says that just the normal course of construction, I have to go out and survey all of my neighbors to make sure of something. So I would have no problem, and it's a standard condition in any approval to say, if you blast, you got to follow the law. I'm not sure it's a standard condition to say, or would even be acceptable to say, you're building a project, you have to go and survey all these properties I would have to give some serious thought to that one. Because it's just a slippery slope.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you're gonna put some serious thought to that, because we will be too, and this is all about making the neighbors comfortable that they don't have any lasting impacts from the construction of this project. And I'm not sure whether there's a lot of property that needs to be surveyed. You know, we're not in downtown Boston. It's you have a limited amount of neighbors that and I'm envisioning this, that it's not, you don't go into the whole development, but the neighbors that are directly abutting, I can definitely see that you wanna survey their existing conditions and provide a baseline. That being said, Cliff Bowmer has his hand up, and I know he wants to respond, I bet, to some other architectural comments that were made earlier, but Cliff, you might also have some experience with this.
I do. And I think, my role at this point is bridging over into recommendations for conditions to the board, that a board would impose or include in a decision. And to this, I do have a number of comments. I'm not sure this is the right time to do all of them, but responding to.
I think this is the right time, Phil.
Okay, well, then maybe I'll work backwards a little bit. The issue on the table right now, this is my recommendation to the board that addresses impact to the neighbors during the construction process. That was also in my letter recommending that a construction management plan be submitted. And as if it can't be submitted prior to getting a contractor on board who could prepare such a plan, it would have to be submitted prior to permitting. And that would outline everything from truck travel, potential impact to town roads because of truck travel, vibration, all of the things that that I'm hearing that people are worried about. It's a conventional condition that would be on a decision. I actually concur that the type of housing that's up on the hill, Black Birch generally is resilient enough, for construction activities that are likely to happen on that site, but it's a legitimate concern And that would be one of my recommendations for a condition, would be submission prior to permitting of construction management plan. If the building commissioner feels that there could be potential impact to the neighbors, he may have additional requirements that if it includes blasting, if it includes excessive truck travel, if the work hours that are proposed are unreasonable, then that would be a dialogue between the building commissioner and the developer at that point. But anyway, so Theo, you want me to continue then, kind of work backwards a little bit? Okay, well, I'll try to work backwards in time. I did make the point in my review about a survey of existing trees that would be left in place. And I think it's terrific that the depth of the boundary has been expanded due to some of the site plan changes. I think that's great. My suggestion was actually pretty much aligned with some of the comments from the neighbors, that it could take potentially very small interventions within the existing tree growth that's actually on the developer's site on a case-by-case basis that could really help mitigate the impact of the view. So I saw in the response to my letter that the developer did take issue with that one. I don't think it's unreasonable, and I do think it could be some very small modifications could make a lot of difference for the neighbors. Other comments I wanted to make, generally, I think, and I think it's terrific, there's another submission coming tomorrow. From my perspective, one of the issues that I've run into on a number of projects has been coordination of the documents. There's another set coming tomorrow. There may be some issues with that. I don't know. A lot of that is outside of architectural concerns. But at some point, I would recommend that the board receive what might be called a record set. And that record set is coordinated across the different disciplines so that where the architectural drawings are showing landscaping, that jives with where the landscape drawings are showing landscaping, etc. So I think that's and I think it's kind of obvious why that's important. It's not really up to the board to decide which documents take precedence. And if there are conflicts in the documents, things get muddy pretty quickly. So there's been a ton of work put into this project, and I know from personal experience, it is hard to keep things coordinated, but it is critical that the board have a comprehensive coordinated set where all of the documents are in alignment and representing the same design intent. Other comments, and I'll echo, I think, what one of the neighbors said. There has been tremendous project made. I think other than what my role of reviewing a more complete set and recommending conditions that might be included in a decision, I just want to throw out a couple of concerns that could that I think need some attention or consideration of whether they would be included in a set in a final set. You did mention, or the plans are showing the notion of continuous walkways, and certainly that the raised table between the two buildings, it helps with that connectivity of the courtyards is really a big change. One small recommendation is that I don't think the civil or landscape drawings are showing continuous sidewalks between the two buildings at the two ends of that central parking area so that there would be a continuous sidewalk path that would go all the way around the perimeter of both buildings. There is a raised table in the middle of that central parking court. I would consider having continuous sidewalks at the ends of those that I don't think are shown on the plans, on the current plans. Another thought was, I think that notion of having the remote optional parking is a terrific idea. And I know that I think it was 28 spaces that would be put as kind of optional. I think one recommendation I have on the northernmost parking lot, I think it would be worth considering losing some of the northernmost parking spaces and increasing the planting in that parking area. That far northern area actually will get quite a lot of southern light. And just from a kind of heat island mitigation strategy, whether it's 28 spaces or 24 that are optional spaces, that would allow you to plant more trees in that section of the parking lot. It's just a recommendation that I would make at this stage. Another thought on the same line about heat island impact. A number of developments that I've worked on have changed the paving in the parking stalls versus the travel lanes in parking. And in the parking stall area that obviously have less traffic than the circulation lanes do, consider a different type of paving, preferably permeable, potentially a higher albedo surface area that could help mitigate heat island effect. And if permeable, potentially diminish the need for, subsurface stormwater management systems. So I'm just pointing that out as something that I have seen in other developments that has worked out quite well. I would say I'll just say one thing from personal experience that was mentioned in my letter, and then I'll go back into a few more, I think, more technical points. That I did mention consideration of relocating the grilling area. That comes from my own personal experience of my children living in a comparable development who complained to me regularly about people in the courtyard grilling, and they were on the third floor, impacted by the grilling smells from people in the courtyard. So I'll just put that one out there. I still think there are values to a remote area that's not contained in a courtyard. But quickly going through other comments, I do think and I'm responding now to the response that were made to my letter. I appreciate that the interior programming, certainly the precise planning of that interior programming from an architectural perspective is not necessary at this point. But I would argue that having a definitive sense of what's included in that program and a commitment to that is important, even if the plans aren't made. I'll give you an example of a development that I reviewed where it turned out it was unspecified, and at a later point, the developer decided to put a childcare area in that in some of the amenity space, which can be a wonderful amenity, but it did have an impact on traffic and other issues that were, associated with the board's review of the project. So I think I understand the plan isn't critical, but I would argue that understanding what the interior program, the response was a program is being developed, but I do think it is important for the board to understand what the limits are, or potentially put limits on what the programming is. Another question I had on the connectivity to the town paths, which is terrific. I mean, the idea, because it is an isolated site, so better connectivity with the town is a terrific notion. I don't know what any of that would mean, and I understand there are connections that are planned. I would just urge you to make sure that you're meeting all accessibility requirements, that pathways that do connect to greater amenities for the residents of the building are meeting applicable accessibility requirements. I think that on a similar vein, as far as code review, there was a response related to whether or not there would be an emergency or backup, whether it's emergency or backup power. And I understand the answer that the architect did provide, but I do think whether if it's important that there isn't going to be backup power, then that could either be a condition, or I would recommend that the applicant provide a little more detail on how they're going to accomplish that horizontal accessible accommodation versus an accessible means of egress that would be that would require a backup generator. And a couple other things.
Sorry, Cliff, if I'm interrupting here. I was not following this here, and I saw some other question marks in the room here as well.
About the backup power? About the backup power?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Well, typically the approach to backup power is responding to the building code's requirement for an accessible means of egress when a building has more than 4 floors above the entry level. It's an important point. It's a technical requirement. There are exceptions that can be met that would, that could allow you to not have backup power, even though you're a 5-story building. And that I think that's what the architect was suggesting. But it's just not totally clear to me that is allowable in this situation. And for that matter, whether that's even the best solution to have a 5-story building where the elevators aren't on backup power. So
okay, hang on, we have the architect here, so you can answer. You can jump in here.
I can respond to that. So my name is Jason Mansky. I'm an architect with the architectural team.
I know you will.
So the building code does say for a building that's over 4 stories, you're required to have an accessible means of egress be one of the elevators. And in order for that to be considered an accessible means of egress, you need to have an emergency power for that elevator. There are exceptions in the code that say you don't need that if you provide what they consider a horizontal egress. And what that basically means is you put a firewall in the building that's a rated separation between sort of halves of the building, so that when you go down a corridor, you go through a rated wall and you have protection, additional protection than you would if you didn't have that firewall. And the applicant has chosen to put that firewall in instead of using the emergency generator.
Yeah.
And the other thing that firewall does is allow them to phase the occupancy of the building. So when half of the building is finished, they can occupy that half because they have that firewall.
Okay.
So there's an added benefit to that.
Thank you. Does that answer it for you, Cliff?
Well, it actually opens the door to what the follow-up was. So I wanted the board, I'm advising the board, not the applicant. So I just want the board to know that So what's being proposed, that there could be a reaction from emergency responders about going into a building where somebody's having a crisis on the fifth floor. So I'm just wanted it to be clear.
Yeah.
That was my main goal. I do think I do remain concerned about the visibility of the mechanical equipment. We heard about it tonight from a couple of the residents. It's kind of related back to my notion about being sure that we have a coordinated set of drawings. I do think it's highly likely that particularly in winter, when the trees aren't leafed out, that there will be a clear view of mechanical equipment across the roof. And I would say to the board, it is a very common condition that mechanical equipment be screened from the public realm. And that does include neighbors' areas. I think I appreciate the increased planting on the access driveway. I think that is a huge improvement, will really work well as the respite areas along the access driveway. That's all good. But I do think in a project of this scale, that it's really not appropriate to have the mechanical equipment be a featured aesthetic of the building when viewed from outside of the building.
No, and we will condition that. We will condition that hopefully very strongly.
Okay.
Because that's a need that wasn't shown on those sections because they weren't known at that point in time, but we know that there's going to be mechanical equipment, all sorts of equipment, and they need a robust screen.
They do, and it's not all the same either. So that an issue that certainly comes up regularly is whether there are any acoustical issues associated with that mechanical equipment, and certainly screening, if properly designed, if there's potentially an acoustical issue, properly designed screening can alleviate that as well. Another point that I wanted to bring up, and I do appreciate that there are going to be indoor bicycle storage spaces, but I do think that the more information about what the ratio is, what the ratio of bike parking is going to be. I know that's come up on other projects, and it's generally a pretty important aspect of any transportation demand management plan is finding a bike to unit ratio that everybody's comfortable with. Just a few more, and I will.
Yeah, this comment, Cliff, it sort of harkens back to your amenity space use, right? We really need some more information on the amenity space and this, so a little bit more interior of the building. What for, at least for the the amenity space, the public spaces within the building, and we know we understand that that's still all pretty schematic and can change, but we would need to see something, I think, by the next meeting on that.
Yeah, and at least from my perspective, it's less about floor plans than program. What's the program, and does that have any opportunity for having some impact outside the the footprint of the building? And my last comment for now, and again, I'd like to follow up with a brief letter after we see this final set, is very near the end of the responses was about the sustainability presentation, and the applicant did say they can provide a narrative, a detailed narrative that would be part of the record on sustainability, and I think that is an excellent idea because I do know that Concord is very much engaged in creating sustainable community. But that's all I had for now. Sorry I didn't have time to put a lot of this in writing, but I really did want to defer until I saw this final set that we're expecting tomorrow.
Thanks, Cliff. Yeah, there's quite a bit of work, I think, to do for, some material to provide by the architect to us. I think, also to just clarify things. I'm not sure whether we need to, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. It's just clarifications. I think that we need to get, and that Cliff is looking for. So that, we have, we have a limited amount of time to do that. So hopefully we can get that done and feel free to have a direct discussion with, pick up the phone and call Cliff and get that organized.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks so much, Cliff. Rebecca Brown, you've been very patiently while we're on the topic of peer reviews. Is there anything, can you give a brief, quick overview of where you think we're heading?
Sure. Yeah. So as far as the traffic peer review, I think we're pretty much closed out at this point. We noted a few things in our last letter that need to be incorporated into the final plan set. A couple of which were alluded to in the presentation earlier with the request that they add the required clear zones for the sight lines on the plan, just to ensure that those are kept free from any future, landscaping features, snow storage areas, signage, vegetation, things like that. And then also they had made a commitment to provide a pavement overlay and new pavement markings and signage at the crosswalk that is right at the Forest Ridge Road intersection with the site driveway, and also upgrade the ADA curb ramps to the existing sidewalk at that location. Those haven't yet been added to the plan, so we would recommend that those get added to the final plan set. And then they also provided a commitment to provide at least one rideshare parking space near the entrance to each building. That also should be shown on the plan set. Then we had also outlined kind of a summary of what the mitigation measures are that they've committed to so far that wouldn't necessarily be included on a plan set, but should be included in a conditions of approval. Those would obviously include the pavement mill and overlay at the Forest Ridge Road intersection site.
Something happened there,
It would
Rebecca.
also include the installation of a stop sign on Sweet Birch Lane as it approaches the traffic circle there at Forest Ridge Road and Black Birch Lane, where there isn't one today. And also installing the rectangular rapid flash beacons, or RRFBs, on Main Street at that crosswalk that's just to the west of Forest Ridge Road, which they had committed to doing that. So that should be included as a condition of approval, that would be implemented prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy on the development. All those should be in place. The last thing that they had was a commitment to provide a contribution to the HOA for some additional pavement markings and milling and overlay and signage at the Main Street and Forest Ridge Road intersection on that Forest Ridge Road northbound approach, where we had noted that the last time that Main Street was actually overlaid, they paved over the end portion of Forest Ridge Road, but didn't reapply pavement markings. And they left kind of a little, a slope there so that it's sloping now down towards Forest Ridge Road just slightly, where there's some ponding and icing that is occurring there. So we would just recommend that they define what that contribution is going to be and make a commitment to providing that, prior to the issuance of a building permit, and that those improvements be in place prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit. And that was pretty much the extent of our review. So I think at this point, we're kind of closed out. They've made the commitments to do those improvements and do those mitigation measures. It's just a matter of getting those formally incorporated onto the final plan set, which it sounds like they are planning to do for their next submission.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I was waiting for that.
I believe at the last meeting that came up, and we did not have the authority to require the applicant developer to take action with the entryway between Main and Forest Ridge. Now, tonight, they're prepared to say, well, we understand that, but we're notwithstanding that, we're still going to make some contribution. I'd be delighted to hear it. But I think it was quite clear we did not have the authority to require that off-site contribution or activity.
Jim?
Sure. Yeah, if I may, so this topic is one that we've been in ongoing discussions with the Road Association. We've actually, as recently as this week, have made a formal proposal to the association that is being considered by them that would incorporate a number of the items that are in the traffic response letter from, I guess, yesterday. Most significantly, the treatment of the replacement of the road, some of the markings that are, I guess it's number 6 on the conclusions. Those items would all sort of take place as part of a replacement of the road or an upgrade of the road, whatever that ends up being. But we would ask that discussion be actually separate from the ZBA, that we deal with that directly with the association.
And I think you heard from Tom that that's the right legal part to do. Yes, and that's something indeed, and alluded to that earlier with some landscaping, that it's like I don't think we can go there as a ZBA. So
Thank you.
thank you. That if we have all the peer review, if we can do landscape peer review, that's, we saved the best for last, I think. And I know you've all been waiting for that. So can we get under the landscape? Let's start with the entry drive with that piece of fence that's out there. Yeah.
You'd like to see.
That's start.
That's entryway blow up.
Yeah, the entryway blow up, just, yeah, it, like that. I mean, it brought up, I mean, I looked at it, that piece of fence is sort of hanging out there, and it's kind of odd with 4 little trees behind it. And I'm focusing here sort of on the public, I'm obviously not gonna comment on it, obviously, but I'm not gonna comment on any of the interior landscape. I mean, that's, I believe, that's you need to do that, but this is sort of the public view of it, although I will go deeper into the site shortly. That piece of fence, it's just, can we at least, like, give it a bit more definition, like scallop the ends, turn them the ends inward, so that it has a little bit more, I don't necessarily want to say purpose, but a little bit more shape, and it flows a little bit better. Having 4 trees, an even number of trees placing in a line is always very static. You either have 3 or you have 5, but 2, like it's across the road here, or these 4 is very static. So I would at the very least, increase that by another one. I would also, on the fence itself, it's a vinyl fence. They're pretty, when they're white, they're shiny, they're really in your face. So tone down the shininess by either change the color, change material, but, you know, and can we soften it in front of the fence, with, you know, and it doesn't need to be anything that's really finicky, but just some simple stuff, whether it's some simple junipers, inkberries, something just to soften the fence, but give that a bit more. And I'd also like to make sure that a landscape architect is on site when these 4 or 5 trees are being placed. I don't want a contractor who measures it off a plan and sticking in them. I want the landscape architect to say, there's a hole, planted in that hole, and move the trees where they really have the best impact. So that's one. As I just said, you know, having an even number of trees is odd and static. So on the other side of the road at the curb cut, having 2 on either side, you know, I'd like to see that to at least a 3. And I know that it's very schematic and it's going to be more developed, but these are my concerns. On the entryway, the aisle in the middle is 6 feet, and Phil, that's face the curb to face the curb, right? It's a bituminous concrete curb, asphalt berm, right?
No, it was sloped granite.
It's sloped granite. So what's from the sort of the edge of the sloped granite, you know, they sit in a ball of concrete, right? So what's that distance from the face to the backside of the concrete?
So it would be, Mr. Chair, it'd be no difference than if it were an asphalt berm. The width of the curb is 12 inches. So it's 6 feet wide from face of curb to face of curb, back of curb means it's 4 feet on the top shelf.
On the top, on the top shelf, and the concrete,
Would be one foot.
the whole concrete would be 1 foot. So you have 4 feet of plant area. So the spec on the trees are they're 3.5 inch caliper. Getting a 4 foot root ball in there is doable, but you need a shoehorn. Plus, given, they'll have, yeah, that's exactly where I'm getting to. They'll have to be smaller. Also, given the fact that, I mean, these are not perfect planting conditions unless you indeed make a really long plant bed and it still will not be good. So having a younger tree with a smaller root ball that you can physically get in there gives it a better chance of survival. So in the long run, with a bit of a smaller tree, 2 inch caliper or so, will have a better effect on the long term. So I know and I don't want, and I'm saying this because you're going to on your plan set, you're going to set 3.5 inch caliper, and when we come out there and final sign off at the end, we'll see that those trees won't be 3.5 inch caliper. So you want to put on your plan what you actually can do and construct, right? So I would advise you to scale those down. And I saved you some money by that, so you can increase some plant material at another spot. And then also I'm not, I'm not convinced that the choice of the lindens in that center aisle is a good choice, because they have a big broad head. And you have quite a few moving trucks going there. You have school buses going there. So I would, if this were my plan, I would pick a tree with a more compact head that, so that any truck that goes down that doesn't whack the branch structure. Further down in the site, the street trees further down this, on this drive aisle. You're specking pin oaks as a street tree, which I think is just plainly the wrong choice for a street tree. The pin oaks, I love them, they're beautiful, but they have a really nice sloping branch structure at the bottom of the bottom branches, and they come down really nicely, and that sort of makes them very graceful. You know, you obviously can't have that on a sidewalk where you have branches coming down 3-4 feet from the ground. And plus that close to a road where they're gonna get whacked. So I just typically don't get involved with choices of species because everybody has their preferences on that. I think this is just from a practical point of view, a very incorrect species there. And I urge you to look at for something better that is a better street tree, you know, serves the purpose better. That's was all I had on, no, I actually had on the landscape. I appreciate the trees that are placed on top of the wall, the evergreens, but as it was pointed out earlier, they're pretty low, although they're on top of a wall, they still are low, and it's at the drop off of the main building. So I think they have a bit of a purpose with headlights, etc., potentially. But my comment is the same as I had with the evergreens here. When they are planted, I want the landscape architect out on site to help guide where the trees that are being planted will have the best effect. You know, and I don't want, you know, evergreen planted up to an existing evergreen. You know, it's like, because a landscape contractor, they typically measure off where they go, and then, you know, they go in. But I want somebody to be able to move them and make sure that they go in the right spot. And if that means that they go a bit further up the hill, then I think that would be good too. But you know, and I'm curious to see, you know, on the plans as they come out, indeed where exactly your boundary is. And whether we can, on your property line, whether we can do something. I would also condition, so I'm rambling here, condition these trees and this piece of fence go in first before construction starts. You know, and then even some of the buffer planting should go in first before any construction starts, as much as we can do that. That was all I had. Yep.
Is this the right opportunity? Can we talk about the width of the entry drive, and are we, or is the board, you know, accepting where we're at, or is there further discussion needed on that with? We're sort of in a position where, you know, the fire department has pushed us in one direction. We've heard some comments that it, you know, it may be too wide. Where do we go on that, if anywhere?
I think it's too wide, but if the fire department wants it, yeah, and I don't think the board can say, sorry, fire chief, you're gonna get, you know, 10 feet less.
Yeah.
You know, so I defer to them, but I think it's in your best interest, because it's gonna look not too good. It's a lot of pavement, it's not gonna look too good. So I think it's in your best interest to have a continuing conversation with the fire chief, because I think, you know, you have 18 feet and 14 feet and plus a mountable curb, plus the little cut throughs. There is a lot of of clay, plus on the other curb, the other side where you have a 6-inch curb, you have a 6-foot wide sidewalk as well that you can hop off of. So if you can have more conversations with the fire department, then please do so. As I said, I think it's in your best interest as well to reduce that rate, and not just from a financial point of view, but just a looks point of view. I mean, because this is a really wide roadway coming in, but as I said, you know, if the fire chief wants it, I'm not, and this board is not gonna trump the fire, not gonna trump the fire chief.
Understood. We'll have the conversation again. Thank you.
I mean, if you want to, but you know, you have.
Approach it and, you know,
Hmm?
it is what it is if that's what we land.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can tell him that he's getting less. So it's his decision. So. Go ahead.
I feel based on what I've heard tonight and particularly tonight, but in the last meeting as well, I think it'd be unfair not to bring out that this is a 40B project. And there are waivers that are being requested that we have to look at and say yay or nay. That we need to have some flexibility. And it's not as if this is a private development coming forward without the normal 40B overlay. And what I'm concerned is that we don't ask for too much, because then a lot of these improvements, and I think there's general agreement from what I'm hearing, the developers made huge progress from the first day they came in. And so I wouldn't want to lose a lot of that by asking for too much, so that there are things that the board, I think ultimately would say, gosh, we can't ask for that because, and we have an outside consultant who has advised us a couple of times on 40B compliance. And this is our second that I'm aware of 40B. It's a big project, but I just think it'd be unfair not to say, hey, keep in mind, this is a 40B, that we need to have some flexibility, that we can't probably demand quite as much as we might in a private non-40B project. And I'm also mindful that most of the cases that come before us as board members are residential projects where you've got 15 feet side yard setbacks, 30 yards rear yard, maybe 20 or 40 feet front yard. And so neighbors are impacted when projects go up. So I just say that to kind of keep it in context, that some of us don't get surprised when a final decision needs to be made.
Yeah. No, we can ask for a lot, you know, and we should, and we should continue to ask, and, you know, there's gonna be a point where they're gonna say, no, you know, that you've gotten enough, but, you know, we need to try to get to that.
Right, well, I agree with that.
So. Anyway, so let's have some more public input.
Mike Berry, 18 Sweet Birch Lane on behalf of Forest Ridge Road. We have asked regularly for cut and fill analysis. I know the lot has been balanced a little bit already, but we haven't seen that. Maybe I've overlooked it, but.
There is a cut and fill analysis on the website.
Because we're trying to anticipate how many construction trucks we will get on this road and what the impact to the road will be. We've issued a report today from our engineers emphasizing the wear of construction vehicles on the road, and we're trying to preserve that road for use. So that's what my comment there. With respect to the traffic impact, I know there's been peer reviews. All of my neighbors are concerned about left turns at the bottom of Forest Ridge Road. I know wait times are going to increase. I have my own concerns about the rotary. I don't know if the traffic consultant's still here, but was there ever a capacity analysis done on that rotary, both existing and proposed? Because I'm anticipating 5 or 6 cars on that rotary at a time, and it could get congested.
Rebecca, are you still online?
I am still online. Yeah. So there was never a capacity analysis that was done for the rotary. And based on the level of traffic that this project would generate, and in comparison to kind of the existing volume of traffic going through the Rotary, we did not ask them to do an analysis there. It should have very minimal impact to the traffic operations at that location.
Okay, right,
But
and
at Forest
just,
Ridge Road, we've seen tracks for cars. I mean, it's aberrant behavior, but they'll drive right over the island. And so, you know, as we get more cars onto that rotary, they could be cutting corners or having accidents. The congestion's definitely gonna increase. School bus traffic, as well as, kids migrating around right now. You do have to look twice before you cross the road there, obviously.
so I just pulled up the, on November the 13th of last year, there was a revised cut and fill analysis, which is on the web.
So we are ongoing discussions with the applicant regarding the costs associated with construction and with future maintenance.
Thank you for that.
Couple things with respect, if I can put a different hat on, Sweet Birch residents are very concerned about, well, this is the first time we saw this plan, and it is less than desirable, I suppose, is the best way to characterize it. I don't know what the solution is. My question to the landscape architect, did you consider any other alternatives?
What's your concern?
Appearance, and function. Light hazards, sound hazards, vehicle, running up the hill. You know, someone comes out of that road a little fast, they could actually mount the hill.
I agree with, the looks of that. This is really just an illustrative solution to that screening. As I've made it clear to the client, I cannot plant on someone else's land.
I get you.
If you look at that, if that's the plan, you'll notice that the fence on the neighbor to the left is on his side of the trees. And it's a nice 80-foot fence that returns into his house. And ideally, that's what you'd like to do on the right-hand side too.
Right.
But I can't show something. It's something we're gonna have to deal with the association and maybe that particular owner himself. But that's the way we typically do it, is as far as a lot of these other
Well, maybe
concerns.
there'll be some ongoing discussions then.
I think that could be
Four
part of the whole
trees.
package, I
Yeah,
don't.
the
know,
four
but-
trees are located there's a double staggered row of evergreens now, and the four trees were located based on the gaps in those trees where it looked like there'd be, that needed to be filled up, and that's why it just turned out to be four, because those are the four gaps, so it is on site. Supervision that needs to take place in most of these evergreen plantings and buffers on the perimeter of sites.
Has anyone looked at what the light is going to do from cars, headlamps onto the houses of Sweet Birch? Is it gonna cast light onto the Sweet Birch residences?
I'm sure it will. I'm sure there will be some light
I've seen other
impacts.
construction
Right.
sites where it's just
Yeah.
intolerable that abutters would set limits, and I'm sure the town of Concord has limits on how much light can, go into the sky, but I'm talking about residents right here. We're gonna get impacted by headlamps taking turns out of, this new drive.
Sure, and the lighting out on site is dark sky compliant. And also that meets all the regulations, and there is vehicle traffic, and that I think is why this plan is has been developed.
My question is, has there been any analysis or tests to see what the illumination on the residence will be?
No, I don't think whether that is a test that you could do, but that's also why, why I earlier on said, like, those trees need to be planted in holes, you need to figure out where the impact is, where they work effectively.
We too want a good plan.
Yeah.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yeah.
Who owns the land behind those homes? Is that common? So it's a common owned land?
It's owned by the Sweet Birch residents.
Okay.
Speed limits, are they gonna be set? I assume, the signs out there aren't, compliant with MUTC, but, is there going to be a speed limit set?
Well, if there's nothing said, it's 25 miles per hour in the town of Concord.
And, the 9-foot sign, is it necessary to be that large? There's reasons in the town of Concord that they have, limits less than that. Is there a reason why it's going to be so large?
They're asking a waiver, and,
Don't they know by now where they live, something like that?
maybe, but you also wanna make sure that people, that it's wayfinding, et cetera,
Other
so.
signs in the area are less outspoken, if you will.
Mhm.
The other issue, a lot of this, if I can spin the clock back a few months, there was a variance that went out. And I think the Sweet Birch residents all collectively felt that they were being impacted, and in the interest of the best plan for this solution, we agreed with our neighbors that putting the road access on the rotary was unreasonable. And so we have a plan. But during that process, we asked for screening repeatedly, and in this room, it was assured to us, and, this plan that we received today is, I mean, at first blush, less than desirable, and we were imagining something a little more substantial and a little more sensitive to the existing landscape. I'm not a landscape architect, maybe there's a better solution, but when I asked if there's alternative designs, I'm told this is what we got. The other issue I have.
No, I just like to say, I think we hear you.
Yeah.
We've heard comments from folks in the audience tonight as well as from the chair.
Yeah.
We're gonna go back and revise that plan. Certainly, I don't want you to feel like
The other
that's what
thing-
we're offering and that's the end of it, but that was certainly what we proposed tonight. We've heard a lot of good comments. We're gonna go back and take a look at it and make revisions.
And it falls under this big heading where, it's hard for the board to condition something on somebody else's, on the third party's property.
But light is not insignificant. I mean, it has an impact on the neighbors, and it is significant. And then the other thing is pocketbook. Sweet Birch residents are responsible for 25% of the repairs and capital improvements to the easement access between the rotaries. And we want to make it aware that we're enduring more traffic and more wear and tear on a road that we barely use. And I know it's an egress, that the buildings wouldn't have been constructed without that. But we would like to have some kind of awareness of where those costs are and who pays for them. And it's
Again.
probably not a ZBA issue. I want to make sure that the applicant's aware of that. To date, we've been told there would be no cost alterations.
Okay, we heard several times tonight that there are some ongoing discussions and, that's pretty much all the ZBA, I think, is involved with, and it's.
Jim Connolly, 27 Black Birch. I am also on the Forest Ridge Board, speaking as a Forest Ridge Board member. I was surprised to hear just now in the traffic section review that the applicant has made financial commitments on the repaving of the road. Can somebody clue me in on that? I take it that that's outside the discussions that the applicant's having with the Forest Ridge Association. So I'm confused where the commitments have been made and who's endorsed the commitments. I don't know.
I don't know if this is the right place to talk about it or not, Jim, but through Jack.
Right, and I'm, so-
It's not the right place to talk about it, but.
I want to cut this off here now. I mean, we talked about, we mentioned it several times. There are discussions with the homeowners associations and the applicant here. And it is really not our purview here to get involved with that discussion. And so if there's discussions going on, I urge you to do that somewhere else than within this public hearing. Because it's, besides the time, it's not something that needs to be, not something that needs to be happening in a public forum to begin with.
I'm not asking for that. Perhaps I've grown dull as the hours go night. I heard earlier that the applicant had made commitments. I heard the applicant request that everything be excluded from the ZBA process. That's news to me. So I'm questioning, is there something that was posted on the website at 5 o'clock tonight? Is that an allusion? Are you alluding to the discussion between the applicant and the association? It's news to me.
There's been some, apparently there is, because there's a sketch here that came out, there is some discussion going on. The applicant has said there is, and that's good. And we have in prior hearings, we've mentioned that there is some, and this had to do with repaving and a full depth repaving, that it really, we can't condition that, we can't be involved with that, and that's been stated on that discussion. And I think all through this tonight during the hearing, we've mentioned several times that, this is a discussion between parties that we can't get involved with, and I don't want to get involved with it either. So we have a public process. There is a plan set that has been filed, and we are under the gun here to get that plan set approved to the best of our abilities within a certain time limit. And the time limit for us is March 14 is when we need to close the public hearing. So, and after that, we have 40 days to come up with a decision. So that's sort of our push here. And I don't want to muddy those waters, because I think there is, on our plate is plenty. I don't want to muddy those waters with you guys' discussion, whomever that is.
If I may, Chair, Jim, I wonder if the confusion, I think the consultant for the town has stated that the developer us has made commitments. I don't want to speak for them. I think what they're saying is, in generality, to work with the HOA to work on the road issues. What I think they're saying, there has not been any commitments made by us that are specific to that outside of our discussion. If that's what you're asking.
And to build on that, it seems that there's been a lot of time and energy and effort spent on traffic studies and pavement conditions, and the list goes on. The consultant just rattled off, crosswalks and ADA compliant issues.
That's in the
Right?
traffic
So
response letter.
It was news to me that is now not considered part of the ZBA process. So, okay.
Or no,
That's
then.
part of this process.
Mm,
The traffic is this.
The traffic is, but improvements on the driveway, I like, we had the low spot last time, that's not something that we can condition. So, there is stuff identified by our consultant that said that, applicant, this is something that you could or should do, for the neighborhood. Pretty much, this is sort of, translating what they're saying, I think, and how I perceive what they're saying. We will condition everything that we think is conditionable by our with our decision, but you know, there is limits. As I said, we can't condition something on somebody else's property that is not party to this. So here we are, 2.5 hours in. And I'm not giving up yet, so I'm seeing Rebecca. Rebecca actually is on. Sorry, I didn't have that screen up. Rebecca, traffic consultant.
Yeah, no problem at all. I was just going to clarify about the pavement overlay along Forest Ridge Road. So the only area that there was a commitment to do a pavement mill and overlay is basically the area right where you see on your screen right now, where the site driveway meets Forest Ridge Road. Where they're proposing new curbing along there that's going to come into their driveway. It would basically be from the edge of new curb to the edge of new curb, where they would do an overlay, so that, you know, basically they're tying in with the existing and everything there. And then where they're doing the new ramp and crosswalk. So that's the place that they had actually committed to doing any work on Forest Ridge Road itself. Everything else was, just in discussions with the HOA.
Okay, thank you.
Very brief. I've always understood Forest Ridge Road as a private way extended from Main Street to the First Rotary. From the First Rotary up to the club is not.
That's correct.
Within
That's correct.
the Forest Ridge Road Association.
Okay, so this is
This is between Throw Club and Sweet Birch, I think, but.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, okay.
so
Just, but that's, so it's, that's Forest Ridge Road here. It says,
This is not
it's not Forest Ridge Road.
this is not Forest Ridge Road. Okay, so
Map it is.
Hmm?
On the town. map
Well,
it
the
is.
town's wrong.
well, yeah. So who owns this piece of property? This pavement? The Thoreau Club does. Okay, 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 good.
And we'll continue to.
Yes.
Okay, okay, cool.
I, just going back to architecture, I have two questions where, I am unburdened by an architecture background, so I just need a little more clarity. Will we see any of the layout of the actual, where the apartments will be, doors, hallways, things like that, before we're voting? On
That's been in
this?
previous.
There's a set.
That it, okay, I
It's in
haven't.
there, yeah.
I will take a pointer to that one. And then could you tell me a little bit more when we were talking about this, backup power source and, ADA access? How does the firewall replace the elevator getting someone out of a higher floor?
It basically provides, safety net, so that if there's a fire in one side of the building, you go through a rated partition to get in a safer portion of the building. It compartmentalizes the building.
So that
It
somebody
provides
could
more time for people to get out.
get to a safer place and then be rescued from there. Yeah, okay, all right. Great.
In essence, it's a means of creating a refuge. So that the assumption is the elevator isn't operating, I need to escape, I'm gonna go through that wall for refuge. It only applies in a fire.
Okay,
So if the power goes out in town, that elevator is still off. Right? And if there is an emergency, the fire department has to get up to it and take care of it without the elevator.
Okay.
If there was a power emergency, that's all, just,
and that's,
it's
And that-
confusing.
but that's only on the 5th floor, right? Because there's the first 4 floors are on emergency backup.
No.
No,
No,
they're
it
not.
goes through all the whole
Emergency
building, second floor, everything. If you don't have power to that elevator, it's off. It's gone.
and that's your call, not our call.
It's building.
The building
It's
code, yeah,
building
yeah.
up.
So you choose A or B and we don't.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Noted.
Okay,
Great, that's it for me.
I'm not gonna even ask for additional comments, although I really do, so,
Can I ask one simple question?
absolutely.
Do we know what the foundation system is? If you haven't done the geo, do you know how you're gonna hold this building up?
We don't yet.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
Hmm.
The assumption is it will be on spread footings and perhaps some kind of ground improvement, but we don't have that yet.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions? Seeing none, then I would like to get a motion to continue this public hearing to Thursday, March 13th. That's 3 weeks from today at 7:30 PM. So that's it. We have four or five other items before. Yeah, that's gonna be another long one. And then we'll have this, there is a lot of work that still needs to get done and a lot of information that we still need to get in order for us to feel comfortable to close the hearing. Otherwise, we're gonna ask Jim again for an extension, and I really don't wanna do that because April is gonna be really tough in town.
Right.
And, you know, that's not gonna be very helpful. But that being said, we are gonna ask for an extension if we don't feel comfortable. So I don't want anybody to say that we're gonna just close, or anybody to think that we're just gonna close on the 13th. You know, we need to feel comfortable, and it is just information getting in it. And I don't also think it's information that's just for the purpose of getting information. I think it's work that you will need to do anyways in this process. You know, I'll just want you to push it forward so that we have when we vote.
Great.
Did anybody want to make that, move that
I would
motion?
love to make a motion that we continue this hearing for Thoreau Residences for comprehensive permit under MGL Chapter 40B for 237 unit multifamily development until March 13th at 7:30 PM.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And aye. Thanks so much.
Off
Thanks
we
so
go.
much for doing this. We brought this project forward a little bit again. So we keep on pushing it forward. So we'll get there.
I've got this. I think this was when I was on Zoom and I didn't
Okay.
have the same visuals.
You do it? I don't think you do a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Motion to, second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, there we go.